Hello everyone, welcome to the discussion on sociobiology, and today we are going to discuss about biological rhythms. Biological rhythms are an integral part of everyday life of most of the organisms. They regulate most of the important functions in each organism. For example, if you take the case with plants, the circadian rhythm controls the particular mechanisms of flowering, the response to seasons, photosynthesis, etc. In mammals or even in humans, it is the circadian clocks that manages our sleep, waking, feeding, etc. Biological rhythm is a periodic biological fluctuation in an organism that correspond to the periodic environmental changes. So this particular process is that's why it is called as a rhythm. It is cyclic. It happens every day. So, and there are two major categories of this biological rhythms, namely endogenous and exogenous rhythms. So, endogenous rhythms come from within and are regulated by the organism itself. For example, the body temperature cycle in the case of ectotherms. And exogenous rhythms are the result of external factors such as change in seasons or the transition from day to night. So, environmental stimuli help to maintain these cycles, and these environmental stimuli are usually called as seed, seed gibbers, which come from the German meaning time givers. So, the time givers or seed gibbers, which are the environmental stimuli, might be sunlight, noise, food, social interaction, etc. So all these environmental stimuli, the term which is given for the environmental stimuli that regulates the biological clock or that is responsible for maintaining the biological clock is referred to as seat gibbers. So each biological rhythm is composed of repeating units, and that's why they are called as cycles. And the length of the time required to complete a cycle is called as period. So every biological rhythm is composed of cycles. Might be daily cycles, might be 28-day cycle, 29-day cycle, like the lunar cycle, or it might be by-month cycle, by-week cycle. So whatever. So whatever it is being cycle or biological rhythms are usually cyclical, and this cycle and repeating units which are called as cycles. So the repeating units may vary. As I said, it might be a day, it might be a week, it might be month, it might be months, etc. And the length of the period required for completion is called of the cycle is called as the period. So these are the two terms which is used in the definitions of biological cycle, which is biological rhythms, which is the cycle, and the other one is the period. Now, coming to the different types of biological rhythms, as shown here, we are now discussing about five types of biological cycle. The first one is the circadian rhythm. So we'll be discussing five different categories in this: the circadian rhythm, then the tidal rhythm, the lunar rhythm, semi-lunar, and the circannual rhythms. So the first one is the circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm is or it is also known as the daily or dial periodicity. That means it is a particular cycle or it is a particular rhythm which repeats. As we said in the definition, biological rhythms are cyclic. So this is cyclic, and this is having a period of 24 hours. So this particular rhythm or this particular cycle, it take place in every 24 hours. So a 24-hour cycle biological rhythm is called as a circadian rhythm. So regularly occurring daily cycle of light and darkness is influences. So circadian rhythm, the influence or the speed gibbers of circadian rhythm are mainly the light patterns, the day and night. The response of different organisms to environmental rhythms of light and darkness is termed as photoperiodism. So the photoperiod cycle consists of two phases, one which is having light, which is called as photophase, and the other one is called as the scatophase. So the 24-day rhythm, which is controlled by the day and night cycles, is usually termed as the circadian rhythm. Some terrestrial animals are active only at night, and such organisms which are active at night are called as nocturnal animals, and they follow a rhythm which is called as the nocturnal rhythm. That's also a 24-hour rhythm, but it is opposite to the common. The common group of animals, they are active during the day, and they take, or they are in the period of rest during the night. But opposite happens in nocturnal animals. They are at rest during the daytime and they are active during the night. And such animals are referred to as nocturnal animals, and they follow something which is called as a nocturnal rhythm. And some animals which are active during the daytime, and they are called as diurnal, and they are called as diurnal animals, like all the common animals which are active during the day and they take rest during the night time. Still others are active during the twilight hours of the dawn and dusk. They are called as crepuscular animals, which are active during the dawn and dusk period, and they are follow a rhythm which is called as the crepuscular rhythm. So there are many animals which show this type of feeding cycle. Most of the animals, including the humans, have a set of circadian rhythm, our daily wake to sleep rhythms can be considered as what is called as a circadian rhythm. Coming to the second one is the tidal rhythm or the circatidal clocks. So this, as the name suggests, this is generated under the influence of the moon tides when the gravitational forces in the earth change. This is also cyclical. And a scientist called as Brown has reported that the opening of the oyster shell valves during the high tides and closing during the low tide condition. So that is a uh, cyclical behavior that is shown by these oysters. When there is a high tide, they open their shells, and during the low tide, they close their shells. Mainly marine, this particular tidal rhythms are usually shown by marine animals. Marine animals in the intercoastal or the intertidal zone of the sea alternatively submerged by water and are exposed to air. This results in the change in several types of environmental factors, pressure, salinity, etc. Similarly, the crabs emerge from their burrow at low tide and actively forage, and they retreat back into the burrow when the tides during the high tide. So these are some of the examples of what is called as the tidal rhythm. So tidal rhythms are also cyclic, and that depends on the high tide and low tide. So depending upon the high tide, some animals become active, and low tide, some animals become inactive. The opposite can also be true for some other animals. Next is the lunar cycle or circa-lunar cycle, which is having a periodicity of 29 and a half days. So the 29 and a half days of the lunar or the lunar cycle coincides with what is called as the lunar rhythm. So some animals show the synchrony of their cycles with this lunar or their behavior with the lunar cycles. So lunar cycles are also common among marine invertebrates and insects. In the sea, the high tides are during this new moon and full moon days. What happens is that the high tides becomes very high and the low tides becomes extremely low during the full moon as well as the new moon days, and these are called as the spring tides. And during the quarter moon and the half moon days, there are moderate tides, and they are called as neap tides. So during these full moon and new moon days, you will have very high tides, and they are usually called as the spring tides. And during the other days, you are having moderate tides, and they are called as neap tides. The reproductive period of a number of marine organisms are restricted to the spring tide, and there are many. And in the case of cattle, their reproductive cycle coincides with what is called as the lunar cycle. So these are some of the examples of what is called as the lunar rhythm or the circadian rhythm. So the ocean reproductive activity occurs only during neap tides of the last quarter of the moon, and this usually happens during the months of October and November. So there are many examples of these lunar or the synchrony of the lunar cycle with the behavior and the reproductive pattern in many animals. Next is the semi-lunar rhythm or the circa semi-lunar rhythms, which is a fourth one. So it is a biological rhythm which are synchronized with fortnightly cycles of the spring tide and the neap tide. Such rhythm is exhibited by organisms like periwinkle. They show marked 15-day periodicity in the locomotory activity. So the species live high up on the shore and is only covered by the high tide or the spring tide. So they only move or they show locomotory activity only during the spring tide. So such cyclical and during the other during the neap tide etc. and during the normal days, what happens is they remain inactive. They are sedentary and they move or their locomotory activity occurs only during the spring tide. That has also become cyclical in 15 days. The last one is the circannual rhythms. So these are the behavioral and physiological rhythms controlled by the biological clock within a period of year. Annual periodicity in the reproductive cycle has been observed in many insects, fishes, birds, and mammals. In many animals, a part of their life in the resting stage exhibits reduced metabolic activity. And this can be the circannual activity. The examples can be hibernation, aestivation, migration. All these are examples of what is called as circannual rhythms or circannual cycles. So circannual cycles usually happens because of extreme weather conditions. That's why organisms go for hibernation, aestivation, and migration. So these are the five different types of biological rhythms. With this, we come to the end of this particular session. In the next session, we'll be discussing about some of the other behaviors exhibited by animals like navigation, homing insect, hibernation, and aestivation. Thanks for hearing.